The planets have aligned, and once again, with ruthless monotony, the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of the Roundtable Rethink Podcast with me, your host, Uncle Paddy, joined every week by twin brother and spare parts bin, Andy, the asshole. Woo! And of course, we couldn't do any of this without bestie, the sage, Stevie Tel Avivi.
Good evening, gentlemen, as always.
This week, we'll be discussing Google's Cloud Next conference. Just think Mecca for AI nerds. The latest segment, the last segment in our entrepreneurial breakdown, building a team. And then finally, we'll be discussing politics and the importance of your vote. Things could get heavy. God damn.
They could get real heavy.
We're back. All right, boys, how's the week been before we get into it?
My week was great, culminating in getting pissed in Banco with Stephen last night. So
Lightweight, very lightweight. No, it's been a great week. Missed Levy while she was away, but beyond that, it's been good. Life is good.
Good, glad to hear it. All right, well, let's get into the docket then. See, last week was an hour and 20 minutes long. Let's see if we can keep
this
this.
Week definitely won't be.
It wouldn't hurt at all to do a 40-minute episode.
Famous last words as we do a 1 hour, 30-minute pod.
Yeah, come back to us in around 10 minutes when we're still going, trying to come up with reasons to stop. So, last week I think was a bit monologue-y. This week I think we'll try and make it a bit more conversational.
Freewheeling and interactive.
Exactly. So, certainly, let's go through our first topic here, which is the final step in our entrepreneurial breakdown. So anybody who's listened to the last 5 episodes will know that we've been trying to take the entire entrepreneurial journey and then break it down into its appropriate steps. Okay,
and it turns out we came up with too many appropriate steps.
Yeah, I thought
and there was a bit of crossover between a few of them.
We've definitely taken things out as we went along. I think we thought it was going to be a 10-week process, and the truth is, this is going to be the last one because we've kind of covered how do you come up with an idea, how do you validate it, how do you then find out if there's a market for that idea, how do you write a business plan. Last week we covered, once you've done all these things, how do you actually go and find some customers through sales and marketing.
Yep.
And then if you get enough of their customers, the business will end up needing to scale beyond you. And so that brings us to the final point in our entrepreneurial breakdown, which is how do you build a team? How do you hire and build team members? Okay. And so what I'm going to ask you guys to reflect on is your own experience as well as you've went through this journey. So I'll throw out some general isms that I wish 26-year-old Paddy Donnelly knew when he was back hiring people for the first time. And then you can maybe reflect and see if you see any consistency with that and how you decided to make your own hires. And actually, I think it's great sharing the wisdom, but sometimes it's even better to share the cock-ups. What's the mistakes? What's the things to avoid? What are the things that have backfired badly? So before we actually get into what makes a good employee and what kind of things you should look for, the first thing is, where do you actually find good employees? So my experience is I've never really used job boards, the job center, the kind of traditional mechanisms for employment. Now, what I have done, and it was a huge mistake, is I've hired whilst optimizing for convenience. And so that would be my first thing I would recommend highly not to do.
Not to do, yeah.
So don't hire that person down the pub because you need somebody and you can't be bothered going through the hiring process and they're available and you had a couple of drinks and a nice conversation and now they're an employee. That's a terrible idea. We can debate the pros and cons of hiring family members.
Give me a pro. Well, Barry, you good lady wife.
I've seen it work well and I've seen it completely implode. Yeah. And so I've seen it work both. Andy and I both worked in a family business. It definitely changes the dynamic for sure. So I think when you are working for family, very quickly the employee-employer relationship gets established and it eventually usurps the family relationship. In our case, the nephew and uncle relationship. Yeah. So it's very hard for them to see you as the nephew and for you to see them as the uncle when they're the employer and you're the employee. So that relationship kind of devours the previous family relationship. Now, for us, it actually went on and was a fine relationship. Wasn't too much drama along the way. We were there a long time, so it wasn't without its drama, but it wasn't completely drama-filled either. But I have seen it destroy some businesses as well.
But see,
And also-
sorry, Stephen.
No, I was going to say, also destroy some families. And again, is it a price that you're happy to pay?
Yeah.
Is the family relationship more important than the business relationship? And if you've got the family relationship, are you able to be as critical and as vociferous as you might otherwise be? So there are a lot of restrictions, but you're absolutely right. You can get some great people, but there has.
I think there's even a step before this in this conversation, which we need to touch on, which is the mindset required to start hiring. So all of us get into business and ended up running our own thing, probably in no small part because we're actually all fucking control freaks, right? So, like, anecdotally, how hard was it for you to let go of all the things that you were doing and move from this control to trust kind of mindset, or doing to delegation?
So you've just kind of hit the nail on the head. And actually, it's that piece of advice which we all remember being given: build a business to make yourself redundant as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And my experience in the industries I've worked in, people are terrible at it.
Yeah.
We believe that we are the secret sauce, and that is fabulous. But then all you're
You
ever
are
gonna
at the
do-
beginning for sure. I mean,
Yeah,
that's definitely true.
But if you don't get rid of that attitude, you are just going to create for yourself a job. You're not going to create a business.
So you're assuming at this point that people are solopreneurs, they've got their thing off the ground, they've got the first load of customers in, but at this point, like we all did it in the early days, they'll be doing everything right.
Yeah.
They'll be doing customer acquisition, they'll be doing lead generation, they'll probably be doing the delivery of service to some extent or another. So I'm trying to think, for me, what is the point where you just go, right, I need to let go of this now and audit my time?
I think you hire when you absolutely have to,
Have
and
to,
not
and
a second
not
before,
before.
right? Because you certainly don't want to hire before you've established product market fit. You don't want to start a business, get 3 customers and hire somebody. You want to get as much customers whilst running the business, while doing the deliveries, while doing the accounts, while sending the invoice. You want to do all of the things because, of course, as the solopreneur, you're actually building up a whole bunch of skills and talents by doing all of those things. And only when you absolutely have to, and especially when you've established product market fit, only at that point should you even consider hiring somebody.
But remember one thing, when you hire someone, initially it will get harder before it gets easier.
Yeah.
So actually the bit that people don't realize is when you employ someone for a period of time, your job is to train them and to bring them up to speed. And therefore, actually that's an additional job on top of everything else you're doing. So you're either going to take on another 10% or you have to give yourself 10% of a buffer to be able to bring someone in and spend the time making them good.
think a good starting point is if you audit your week, audit your full week, what are the low leverage things that you find yourself spending a lot of time on that are low leverage and you're actually garbage at? I know in my case, when I started the agency, I loved the sales and marketing side of it. I loved the product development side of it. I fucking hated the admin and dishing up, spooling up the contracts, generating them, sending them out in the echo signs and stuff. And I didn't have the attention to detail for it, so I actually wasn't very good at it at all. And I do remember that first hire that we made, which was Shaz. Remember Shazza?
Yeah.
Shout out Shazza. And Shazza came in and took that entire part of the business off of us. And that was one of those light bulb moments where we were like, oh, I don't need to think about that anymore. She's doing it. She's great at it. I can go and be the best servant that I can be to the business now, passing those responsibilities off and staying focused on the high leverage responsibilities of lead gen and customer acquisition and finding new product.
Yeah, your first hire should ideally fill a gap where you're weak.
Yeah.
Don't hire duplicates of yourself, right? So if you're a great salesperson and a great marketing person, but you suck at admin and back of house,
now enough about me.
find somebody who does that. If you're a coder and you're an amazing coder and you're a brilliant engineer and you've got your nose in a laptop all day, but you can't actually speak to customers, you suck at that part of it, then hire somebody who's awesome at talking to customers. So don't create duplicates of yourself. Fill in the gaps in the business. And the first couple of hires are so unbelievably critical to get right. I mean, if you screw up with the first couple of hires, you almost never recover from it.
But do you know what I'll tell you on that point, Paddy? Like, I think there's a variable here that didn't exist when you and I and Stephen were building the business 17 years ago, or longer in your case, Stephen. Do you actually now look to hire straight off the bat, or do you look to automate straight off the bat? Or do you look to, instead of hiring an employee, do you look to maybe go and hire a VA or a part-time person that you get on?
I think eventually you need an employee, right? Yeah. Maybe that covers you for some time, but I don't believe you can have an infinitely scalable business as an
But the point I'm
owner-operator.
making is, what's your first move? Do you automate first, then hire, or do you hire
make
first?
yourself-
We've already said it. You don't hire before you absolutely need to.
So automation would come as a pre-step then?
Before you absolutely need to, whatever that looks like.
That
for
wasn't
you.
true 20 years ago,
No.
10 years ago,
But
right?
let me ask you another question, because again, I think there's a difference between a simple admin employee and someone that adds value to your business. Because you're talking about someone that complements your skill set, and that's a great point, because that's exactly what I used to seek, people that were strengths to my weaknesses. That brings you to the point about, what do you give up to get them? Are these people going to come in on a salary, or is that the moment you have to decide? And again, it's a big mental block for a lot of entrepreneurs. This is my baby. I own this baby. Are you bringing them in on just a salary, or are you bringing them in on some share of equity or some promise for the future?
Yeah.
No, just a salary. I mean, it would be my advice not to give up equity in your business to anybody.
You know
unless,
better than most
again,
people
you
how expensive.
absolutely need
Aye.
to. That can be a very expensive mistake.
You know better than most how expensive dishing out equity can be in a business, particularly if it gets any kind of scale or
And listen, I'm not
asset
sure
value.
that advice is universally applicable to all situations. When you get bigger companies, when you're in a scale-up mode, like you've established your small business status, you're doing 5, 10, 15, 20 million in revenue, and then you're trying to move to become a medium-sized business, maybe at that point, you bring in big corporates, big executives, and at some point, things like equity and share programs become important. But certainly not the solopreneur looking to employ their first. And by the way, that's a really good point. Never, ever for your first couple of hires, go and bring in some ex-Google executive or ex-Microsoft executive or ex-big company person, because they will not be able to cope with a lack of structure.
And just the general hustle and multitasking required in any particular role when you're working for a one-man
If
band.
you get the ex-VP of sales for a big company, he's probably not going to be the guy that comes in and makes cold calls and then writes your first objection handling scripts, right? Because he did that 25 years ago, and now he's got people under him and they've got people under them that do that type of thing. So that would be another bit of advice. So I think we're at the point now where, we know when you need to go and hire somebody. That's only when you absolutely have to.
We know who you need to hire.
You know who you need to hire, somebody who complements your skill sets. Now, I think before you go and embark on this process, a really important thing, and this is the biggest thing I learned in business about hiring people. And by the way, we've not said it yet. Hiring people is the most important thing in business. It's impossible to scale a business really without people.
Because you get to leverage their time.
So treat it like that. Don't see hiring as a pain in the ass thing you do one afternoon that you can be bothered with, and you hire for convenience, either a family member or somebody down the pub. Definitely not the right thing to do. Where was I heading with that? I was heading to... Where was I heading?
So before you get... Well, I think you were kind of teeing up before you get to the interview.
Oh, yeah,
stage,
I've got it right. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Write down your vision for the business and your values, because they are the guiding light of who you are going to hire. And every decision should be grounded back in your values.
I can make one point about values, and it's one of the hardest things. I've done it myself. Very quick story. Moving partnership many, many years ago, brought someone in, and then we sat down. He said, right, we're going to go to a new partnership. What's important to you? I went, great client contact, great quality, this, that, quality of work. About fourth down, I went, money.
Yeah.
I was lying. I was embarrassed to say that money was the main driver.
Yeah.
Being honest with yourself on your values and being able to honestly tell people what the values of the business are. Not the ones you want to talk about, but the ones you want to live.
Yeah.
I think is a big, big thing.
Yeah.
The truth is, right, There's very few of us get into business because we were just so passionate about changing the world one wedding reception at a time. Do you know what I mean? Most of us get into business because we wanted to make some fucking money.
Sure, but it does help if the company's kind of rooted in a mission.
Of course.
Like, I mean, like we told
But your
the team-
mission can evolve. Do you know what I mean? Like,
so what was ours, right? To tie it back to a practical example, we used to tell the team, we are the Iron Man shield that these small to medium-sized businesses strap on every day, and they go into the marketplace and they do business against $100 million, billion-dollar companies. They compete and they win. And they can only do it because of the innovation and the work that we are doing here inside this company and at the price point we can deliver. It's a miracle what we do for these guys for the money we deploy it at. And only because of that do they get to stay in business. Only because of that do they get to protect hundreds of thousands of jobs. I mean, we absolutely made the team understand it and they believed it. So you can come and help me do that, or go and work for some fintech bullshit thing, hustling mailmen out of their fucking life savings for the next shit coin project.
And I think the thing, when I come back to the money thing, money doesn't come from chasing money.
Yeah.
Money comes from great product, great service, great value, sorting pain points, but be honest with yourself.
and you're
about what
absolutely
your
right.
drivers
Like,
are.
people do like to work for mission-driven companies. You know what I mean? It's good to feel like you're part of something, and I do feel like in all of our companies at some point the mission developed, but I'm not sure it was a mission on day one, right? Yeah.
But you're thinking about starting the business and establishing a mission for you. My mission is I want to make money. You making money is not a priority, or it's not the reason why an employee is going to join your business. So when I say values, I mean things like, what's the values that we believe in the business and we're actually going to live them, right? So I'll give you an example. Be kind would be a value. Now, be kind is different to be nice, right? Because it's not kind to let you walk about with black things in your teeth all day when I know they're there. So I'm going to tell you you've got black stuff in your teeth, even though it might
I got black stuff in my teeth,
even though it might cost you a moment
cheesy
of embarrassment, right?
Cheesy
But
twist.
it's not kind to let somebody. So kindness is not the same as niceness, because kindness is about being respectful, being kind. If something happens to a family member, are we going to go, that's really sad, but you need to get to your desk in 5 minutes? No. If we're kind and we're living out our values, we go, we totally understand. If you need to take the day off, take the day off. If your granny dies, absolutely, go to the funeral, take some time to recover. That would be living out the mission of being kind, right?
Yeah, but the worst thing you can do is talk values and
don't act on it.
on it.
100% agree.
Whatever you're going to be
It's
honest.
got to be something you're prepared to live out. And then if you're prepared to live out the values, then all your decision making about employees need to be rooted in those values. They're your North Star that everything gets benchmarked against. Because if you don't actually have values, what you are in terrible danger of is if you're just hiring for skills and you don't think about culture and you don't think about values, you'll end up with the worst possible employees in the world, which is talented terrorists. Right? Yeah. We had a few of them inside the business. We had talented terrorists. They did not conform to the values of the business. They were not team players. They just bucked every norm and trend that we had established, but they were actually really fucking good at what they did.
Another thing about values, and again, I work in a firm just now which is very value driven, but what's great about having clear values, every firm has a culture. Every firm has a culture, whether you know it or not. It's just the way we do things. But being clear about that culture, being clear about that values makes scaling much easier, because actually everyone's moving in the same direction. And it's that ability from employee 1 to employee 100 to be able to add consistency.
And ECI, it was things like own the outcome was a value. Deliver awesome was a value. You know, like these were things that we had to live out, improve, we were living it. And then when we had performance reviews, we had to list a goal and an achievement and then link it back to a value. So if you actually make values the core of the business and you're prepared to live them out through good or bad, here's what I used to tell people in interviews. I used to go, you are going to love working here. We use the most cutting edge technology and tools to places like Disneyland for software developers, right? Compared to writing Windows software for fucking Windows 2000 on a 3-tier client server that runs under your desk, that which you have been doing compared to what we do, this is like Disneyland for developers. You're going to love the culture here. We are going to have your back like no other company you've ever worked for has had your back, and you are going to have ours. And you know what that means? Is we have this thing called the goodwill kitty. And sometimes if you need to take the kids to school at 2 o'clock every day because you don't have childcare, we're not going to sweat the details at all. And you will unknowingly and unwittingly be withdrawing from the goodwill kitty. And then if we're up against the deadline, where, you know, on the last Friday of the month, we have to quickly throw a bunch of guys on a call and work to 6:30 or 7 o'clock that night to squeeze out a feature for an important customer, then we're going to expect you to be at your desk. And we're not going to count it up, and we're not going to meter it. We're going to have each other's backs, and we're going to leave you alone to do great work. We hire professionals, we leave them alone to get things done, and we're going to have your back like no other business has ever had it before. That was our sales pitch, and we meant it. We meant every single word of that. Andy knows that at ES Tech, the team came first. If anybody needed any flex, I don't ever remember denying a request
anybody
for flexibility in 17 years.
Yeah.
Not once.
Yep.
I was the can man. Yeah, Paddy, can I do? Yep, do it.
Our version of that is we used to connect the staff with the product, because our product is people. So through showcases and through bands regularly coming into the office, you know, if we hired like Holly or Gary or any of the guys in sales, we would say to them straight away, this is Craig, big bear hug for the Big Papas. This is the story of this band. So Craig was working in the as a bouncer at the Dora box, you know, Jamie was doing the open mic night, you know, absolutely hating their jobs. And, you know, through the power of what we do, these guys are earning a fabulous full-time, dignified living, pursuing their passion. And then Holly and Gary would get to know these guys, meet them at showcases, realise they were a brilliant band as well. And so it just made them feel great about, you know, going through the fire every day, making all the sales calls, sending all the text messages, because they really felt like they were making an impact on good people's lives. So connecting with the product was a really big thing for us.
Patty McCord, who was the lady who, Reed Hastings gets a lot of the credit for Netflix scaling up as a business, but actually the lady who actually operationalized and scaled Netflix was a woman called Patty McCord. And she wrote a book. It was actually one of the best books I ever read about leadership and building teams. And so I might butcher the references, but it was kind of something like this. She basically said, in business, you're either building a sports team or you're building a family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're building a family, then we're going to be competitive on salary, but you could probably get better money if you went to the top tier guys. But we were going to have your back. And so
there's going to be flexibility.
If your
there's going to be
granny
empathy.
died, we're going to be there for you. If your kids are sick, you're going to have the time off. If you need that flexibility for the business, we're going to be there for you, and you're going to be there for us. And we're going to build a real meaningful relationship over time, right? We're going to become mates. As I became, all the guys I know at work, but I became it over time. You cannot offer that up front, and I will come back to that in a second. So these relationships are built on real, recognizing real, right? The fundamental baseline contract is, I'm hiring you because you're going to be effective and help me build and grow the business. And in return, I'm going to give you a salary every month. That's got to be the baseline understanding between employee and employer. Once I've established that you're the real deal, that real recognizes real, then we can build a deeper, more meaningful, and eventually a personal relationship.
You get more one-on-one time.
But you earn that over time with each other. You don't offer that up front. So that's something that comes through real recognizing real and establishing that over a long period of time.
And good behaviour on both sides. And
so that was Patty McCaw's thing. And we're going to have each other's back, and we're going to build a family, and we're going to figure out how to make things better for each other every year. That's one way to go. And it's the way that most people go. There's another way to go, and that's we're building a sports team. So we're Google, and we're hiring LeBron, or the metaphorical LeBron, right? We're hiring the number one
sales guy, marketing guy, coder, whatever.
A-rated, bulletproof, gold-plated resumes, top hires. We're going to pay them top dollar. But man, the minute we drop LeBron on the fucking court, he better be a rock star. He better be everything that we hoped he is. And if he's not, we're going to fucking trade him straight away and get rid of
purely
him.
a performance-based.
It's a performance-based role. And if LeBron's granny dies, we don't care. We're going to pour petrol over, throw her in a ditch, if that's what it takes to get LeBron back on the court as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And for some businesses, that model works. If you're a highly VC funded, you're trying to double, triple, quadruple every 6 months and get to a $10 billion.
Stone cold killers.
You need stone cold killers who have a sports team environment, who are earning top dollar, but have to produce at the highest possible levels. And so the family dynamic where you come in, we're hiring for culture first. We're hiring for a culture fit or a culture ad. We're going to help you develop skills. You're going to become more effective over time, and we're going to go on the journey together. We're going to be competitive, but we might not be able. So I thought that was a really great distinction that she came up. You're building a sports team or you're building a family.
And most companies are building a family.
One of the questions I always like to ask, I do a little bit of kind of seminar work with firms and teams occasionally. And the first question I always like to ask a team is, do you believe that your team are the best solution for your clients for this problem? So what you really want, and I'm amazed when people giggle and go, because they don't actually firmly believe it. So you're really wanting people, the family, the ones that believe in the same things that you believe in, that actually you are the right fit for your clients. Because if they're not there for that reason, they're never going to be the right people or the right work.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. So just before we go into hiring, the last wee stretch on that point that we're making, run about teams and culture and stuff, is I notice in every business, particularly small businesses with, let's say, 10 staff, a dozen staff, they all end up like a wee carbon copy of the leader. Mm-hmm. So you actually set the tone for your 100%. Business. Yeah. Your personality and your culture and how you conduct yourself cascades through and I've seen that play out fantastically well, and I've actually seen it play out terrible.
Yeah.
I've seen a stone cold wanker who's got a business and then all his staff end up just wee mini wankers, do you know what I mean? And I've seen like really, really good dudes, good guys and gals with great ethics, with brilliant personalities, really fair, really effective. And that culture tends to cascade down through the team as well.
100%. No, I think that, listen, founders are really important to their businesses, particularly, not to 10 people, not to 20 people. Founder energy still dominates the entire company, and yet people want to model and mirror the founders. So
let's start hiring people.
Well, we're kind of already into hiring people. So the only thing I would say about hiring is don't see it as a solo thing. I would never hire just me. I always had my left and right hand man, Seamus and Neil, on the phone. We hired together because we actually saw and heard different things. So I think it's good to have a sounding board there. I was very reluctant to hire as a solo.
And I think as a solopreneur, that doesn't mean to say you can't bring people in, friends, family.
100%.
You've got a huge amount of resources around you. Use them. Get them to give you some input. You have someone in your circle.
So moving on for that, how do we find candidates and how do you interview people for the job?
Well, we're not quite there yet. So I want to just establish these things and then we'll move on to that. So what we're basically saying is hire for culture first, right? Culture's the number one job. When it came to developers, I put them through a code test and that told me if they had the skills, right? I didn't have to worry about that. They did the code test, they passed it, they had the skills, they failed it, they never had the skills. We always start it with 2 30, 40-minute conversations first because I'm screening them for a culture fit. Because if I screened them for the code test first and they passed it, it wouldn't matter if they were a bad culture fit. I wouldn't hire them anyway. Mm-hmm. So you start with culture first. Do they fit in? Are they adaptable? Do they have that versatility? And could they learn the skills over time?
Yeah.
Okay. And that is job number one. Hire for culture. That's Uncle Paddy's top tip. We got really good at this in the last 5 years. In fact, I'd say we got exceptional at it. We got exceptional at screening people for culture. And it took me out of a mode that I was in where I was always just optimizing for skills, like reading the resume. Do they write in the right languages? Do they have the Laravel framework? And by hiring some of the guys, having to fire them very quickly because we realized that although they can do decent work, they just stink the place out. There's some, I won't mention any names, but there's one guy in particular, he just had bad energy.
Yeah.
And in a small team, one hire has a massively disproportionate impact on the energy, and one bad hire at that level, at the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7
Can
people
fundamentally
level,
alter the energy of
can
an
fundamentally
office
screw
or
up
of a team.
So you have to be so careful, and you've got to optimize for culture first. Don't give out crazy titles straight away, right? If you're hiring your first salesperson, don't call them the global VP of
Director of sales.
directors and senior this, and it's just rubbish, okay? Because the truth is, once you call them the global director of sales, you'll never be able to take that title away from them. And if you're lucky and you get to grow, you'll eventually need a real, proper global director of sales.
And then, unfortunately, also one of the problems with calling them the global director of sales is 6 months in, they'll start to research the salaries of global directors of sales and realise.
And your two-man band will be benchmarking you against the global director of sales for Salesforce.
Ready-made confrontation. Yeah.
So resist the temptation and the urge to hand out crazy titles, and then be really, really honest with people about what they can expect, okay? People should absolutely know up front that you're going to hold them accountable. Don't oversell the opportunity. And depending on the role that you're hiring for, sometimes you're selling them on you, and sometimes there's more of an honest on them selling themselves to you.
Yeah.
So if it's a strategic role for the business that are in high demand, a lot of the time you're selling yourself, you're selling the business and why they should come work for you. You've kind of already made your mind up they're the right person. Resist the temptation to oversell and not set the right expectations, because nothing is more expensive than hiring somebody who thought they were coming into an environment and a culture that turned out to be something completely different that they can't handle, and now 3 months down the line, they're gone.
And use your lack of size and scale to your advantage. Like, one of the things I always used to say to people coming in is, you can go and work for Mercedes or BMW or a big call center or something like that, and you'll just be a faceless person in an ocean of, faceless people. Whereas coming here, you can make a really big impact on the business early doors. You get great proximity to the leadership of the business. Company's growing, it's growing places, and as one of the foundational members of staff, you've got the best possible chance of progressing because of that. So you can actually use your lack of scale as an advantage.
But honestly, set goals from the get-go, set the right expectations, right? Nobody should come in thinking they've got a long, luxurious 6-month bed-in period to get comfortable. Like, it should be clear to people that are coming into a high-performance environment. We operate I coined the phrase, and I'm proud of this one, we operate with an unreasonable sense of urgency, right? That's how I used to describe it. We operate with an unreasonable sense of urgency, and that's the environment you're coming into. Better for you to know that up front. That will either excite you or terrify you, and if it excites you, we're the right place, and if it terrifies you, you should go somewhere else. And I need to know that now, so I don't put 3 months into somebody
who's to unwind this
eventually gone
a month later
to go work somewhere else. So that would be another top tip. All right, I think we've covered all that kind of stuff. So where do you actually find people? So in my experience, I could teach them the skills. I could make sure they were a great culture fit for the business. What was a nightmare was trying to teach them the industries that we operated in. That was a much, much bigger job if they never came from that industry. So we made decisions early doors for certain roles that we only hired industry people. Because if I've got to explain the UK business supplies market to you, and you've got to know every wholesaler, every manufacturer, every buying group, every SKU, ERP vendor, every SKU, where they all fit together, what the hierarchy is, who's on the ascendant, like that alone is 3 to 6 months worth of effort, right? So where I hired from trade associations, okay? I hired from competitors in the space. I hired from buying groups. So joining buying groups, joining trade associations, subscribing to trade magazines, being part of the industry that you operate in, that community, particularly if it's local, is actually a great place to find those first employees. Now, you could take Andy the Asshole's marketing lesson from last week, and then you could go and target people on Facebook. But honestly, that's much harder to do, and there's more screening and more probably interviews that need done to find the right person. So start within your network, leverage the people that you've got access to, but don't hire for convenience.
Yeah.
Don't hire because your nephew needs a job and he's doing nothing right now and you need an employee. That would not be the right move.
Probably we've got a similar view in this, but I'm going to ask anyway, would employment agencies fit in all of this, or advertising?
They don't fit in at this point.
Aye.
Yeah. They're too expensive. Yeah.
Everybody, we've had success on both sides in terms of we've employed most of the people that we know through network. So just introductions through acquaintances to good quality people. And actually, arguably our most effective and longest standing member of staff, Kerry, just came through the standard Indeed job posting process as well. So both can be, that's really just a way to get people through the door and get people in front of you. What we're going to come on to in a second is really how to make sure they're the real deal, regardless of what way you were introduced to
We're
them.
not coming on to that in a second. I don't know what you're talking about.
How to interview people.
No,
we're not covering
Nothing
that.
like that at all. No, we're 35 minutes in. I've already broken down the mechanics of where do you find people and what are the big rocks that you need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
Culture versus skills. That's as much as we could possibly cover on this. I'd want to fast forward to the point where you actually have the employee, and then what's the next most important thing to do? So the next most important thing to do is onboard them properly. Okay? This is the biggest mistake I've made in my career. Being too busy and not putting the time and the energy and the effort into onboarding employees properly to make them effective. And much to my internal shame and embarrassment, I would say there's certain employees that never made it, where they never let us down, we let them down.
Absolutely.
The business let the employee down rather than them letting us down, because we never put the time and the energy into them to make them effective.
I think also because you know your business so intimately, there's a level you get to where I would call it an unconscious competent. You do things, you don't have to think about it. It's like breathing. You don't think about how to breathe, you just breathe. You can't understand how anyone would have to think about it. So realizing that the level of expertise they have in some of the areas you're going to want them to deal with is way below where you believe it should be.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's actually normal. And you also have to explain to them that it's normal so they don't get disheartened. One of my favourite stories, again, is first day at current firm, fabulous, great induction process, bring me in, show me all the IT, fabulous. Go upstairs, sit there on my laptop, no frickin' idea. Because it was it was 2 hours on a system that I'd never worked with before.
But they expected you to see everything once, immediately retain it, and then that's your 2 hours done, right, get on with it.
And that's now changed. There's a much, much better, a much fuller onboarding, a constant, but that kind of showing people something isn't training.
But for the first time ever, Stephen, and this links us all back to what
The conversation this morning
is about AI.
Yeah.
So it's never been easier to codify the information and the knowledge in the business and put it somewhere that's accessible and searchable for employees. The last 3 years has changed everything. So before your business becomes unwieldy, before you build up too much legacy and too much information, and then you get too busy to solve the problem, another amazing opportunity at the very start of your business journey is document, codify the information of the company into a chatbot or a knowledge base so that it can be a resource for new employees who are starting in the business.
And not just a resource, you're talking about a two-way resource, not just a resource that you have to sit down and read like a document, a resource that can pepper you with questions and tests as well as the knowledge base as well, in the form of that kind of GPT.
And that they can query for just the information that they're stuck on at just that moment.
Yeah.
And so that is the biggest hack in onboarding.
Huge.
It's a nightmare when you've got a complex business and a complex product, because if you're hiring, if you've got a power washing company and you're hiring a new power washer, there's only so much, with all due deference and respect to power washers, there's only so much to know about power washing. Whereas when you're connected to 47 different ERP systems and you're selling to customers in 7 different countries and different languages, and you've got 200 app integrations in the App Store, trying to consolidate that information into something that makes sense or do the knowledge transfer from one person to the other is a freaking nightmare.
And it brings it back down to what we said before, which is things get harder before they get easier. But if you spend the time, that little bit of extra time, and build the knowledge base, it makes scaling up. But if you just employ someone and expect to train them and the old way of training them, then they train the next one, all you get is basically Chinese whispers. You lose focus over time. You should be increasing focus over time.
I think last week we spoke about, that there were pre-steps that you had to go through now if you were trying to do this right before you started running any marketing. And I actually think that, codifying the information for that particular task into a GPT is actually the pre-step that you should take before thinking about hiring for any position, unless, of course, it's a very narrow position, which is just maybe like a business process person or something like that. But anything that's got any meat in the bone in terms of roles and responsibilities and actions, to me, that's just a logical pre-step now before hiring anybody.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree. And that has been my biggest business failing. Not until the very end did I realize that I needed to do that. And then by that time, there was way too much information and I was way too busy to be able to tackle it in anything like a reasonable amount of time. And so there's so much legacy had built up, so much information. I would have had to have taken a year off to write the knowledge base for it.
Oh, it's do as I say, not as I do. None of this stuff was available when we were hiring people in the back.
But that's what I'm saying. New entrepreneurs getting into it now. There's never been a better opportunity, and building that discipline to do it from scratch will make your business infinitely more scalable than it otherwise would be.
The difficulty, and again, it's mindset, because you've always got contradictory mindsets. Creation is exciting. Disruption is exciting. Maintenance, management, codification is boring. And you have to be able and prepared to spend a bit of time on the boring stuff as well as the exciting stuff all the time.
Physical proximity is something that's worth thinking about as well. People learn a tremendous amount through osmosis, just being in the same airspace as other killers doing that thing. So I always tell a funny story. We have a guy who worked for us, Powerful Liam, we called him. He came into the business. He looked like he was 20, he looked 14. He worked for the PF's office in Paisley. He came to us and we bought him this Thanos glove. The Thanos gauntlet. And we put it on his left hand, and violating every HR law that had ever been written, we told Liam that only using his right hand did he need to learn the software. And once he had learned it to a sufficient level, we'd take the glove off and he could use his left hand. So 2 months later, Liam got to use his left hand again. But the guy was sitting next to me. He was sitting next to Michael Horn and Darren McIntosh. He was sitting in a group of absolute killers, and he became a killer being exposed through osmosis to other killers. And so, honestly, if you've got a customer-facing operation, like a sales operation, I know people hate it these days, but it's very much worth thinking about putting that in an office and putting people in the same airspace, because that is where the learning truly happens. I will tell you that we have failed to be able to, in a remote way, onboard professional services people and make them truly effective. Like people whose job it was to onboard customers. Anybody we hired remotely, there was something about just trying to do the knowledge transfer through a blizzard of 1 hour long Teams calls. It just never landed the way it did. We were never more effective than when we were all in the office.
It's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. COVID brought around remote working, and there's lots of positives, but for those particularly learning, I see it in law all the time, for those learning, they need to be in the office around people where they can hear and see, smell, touch, and you hear them, young professionals, young salespeople, young whatever, end up sounding like their bosses because they're hearing.
That's what I was saying earlier.
The tone of the voice,
culture
the
comes
way
to the top.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that was
a 45-minute episode has now been a 45-minute segment.
Anything we missed, or do you think we can just move on?
There's loads of stuff that we've missed, but we've run out of time.
We could spend forever talking about whatever.
Yeah, and we can't spoon feed every single step of every single thing about.
I actually thought the interview process was very important to touch on, but we've totally done our time on it. Yeah,
I don't have anything on that.
Okay. Let me move on then. And again, it's probably a soft subject tonight. And I've been thinking a lot about what will I speak about for maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'd like to talk about values. I mean, a lot of the stuff is intertwined. I think the stuff that we've been doing with entrepreneurialism, the stuff that we've done with employment hackers is really important to not just young people, to everyone. And I come back to, not to talk specifically about any particular country in the world at the moment, but I suspect you can take some inferences from things I'm going to say about how do we end up with the governments that we end up with. Everyone at the moment, we've talked about this out with the pod, on the pod, people are unhappy with the way their governments are behaving. And what I want to talk to tonight, maybe about voting, because I think that's important, but generally about values and how we get information. And again, that whole thing about codifying, passing on to the next generation. My son, I always love to say to him, you are smarter than I am. He definitely is. If you're listening tonight, son, you are definitely smarter than I am. All I have is experience. And all I ever want to do by giving you a little bit of my experience is to save you some of the scars that I've earned over the years. And I think it's that information, your parents have probably told you everything that you need to know by the time you hit the age of 10 or 12 or 14. It takes you the rest of your life to contextualize what they mean. So maybe over the next couple of weeks, I'll try and contextualize again some of the things that are important. And tonight, let's talk about voting. And one of the things that really worries me, we're lucky we live in a democracy. Now, I'm not even going to say tonight that a democracy is the best way to live. Might be. It's what we live in, what we're used to. And you get a real sense that people are unhappy with democracy at the moment. And that's why we're seeing a move to more radical versions of what a democracy might be. So,
are people polarising to the right or the left?
So we're going to see in the UK, for example, Reform and Farage is talking, and you're seeing it all across the world. And one of the problems with being unhappy with democracy is that, do you exercise a vote or do you not exercise a vote? So two things I'm going to talk about. One, I think that, and again, I'm going to say some stuff, and please try and live with me on the meaning rather than the exact words I use.
Just say it.
All right. Everyone's got a vote. No matter how educated they are, no matter how informed they are, everyone has got a vote. And that's how it should be. But I think we do ourselves...
Or should it?
Well, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we do not encourage young people to do two things. Everyone to do two things. Mm-hmm. One, to vote.
Yeah.
Okay. If you do not vote, you cannot have an opportunity to then be unhappy,
complain about the outcome
with what you've earned, what we end up with, and what we might think is my vote's not important, but actually it is. And if you look at the last, I downloaded some stats earlier on, and we probably know most of this stuff, but I'll just confirm it anyway. In both the US and the UK elections last year, the under 25s were about 10%, roughly 9-10% of the overall vote, but only 42% of them roughly voted. So less than half of the under 25s voted.
Wow. Okay.
And yet the over 60s, over 70s were showing voting levels at 70+%.
Yeah.
So effectively, when you're looking at things that were decided by 1-2% and less for these massive swings, actually, if younger people had got out and exercised their vote, they could have massively swayed the outcomes, both here, America, Germany, wherever else you want to look at elections. So exercising your vote in your generation will make a difference. I'm particularly speaking to those younger. Then you come back to...
Do we know why they're not voting? Is it just disillusionment?
I think there's a number of things I hear. I think there is generally, they don't feel that they know what's going on.
Yeah.
Here's the point. If you're listening, the under 25s, no one knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think their vote is as
But
valid.
they're not consuming current affairs. Like they're consuming entertainment. Yeah. So what did we have when we, in the Stone Age, when we were all young? You had John Craven's News Round, which was the news of the day, dumbed down for kids. Then you had Growing Up News.
Yep.
There
News
was
at
no
10.
There was no internet, and there was newspapers and comics, right? So there was always an awareness of what was happening in the world, because every night your mum and dad sat down and watched the news at 6.
And there was
or the
only a
news
few
at
channels on the
10.
TV. So
Well, let me deal with that one,
Okay.
because I think you're right, but I think there has never been more news. However, I think that we are all, and this is not just for the younger ones, this is across the generations, we're all getting lazy. We owe an obligation to ourselves, A, to educate ourselves, and B, to educate others.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, there has never been more opportunities to find out the other side of the story, the full story, and it's never been easier to listen to what you want to listen to. Yeah. And we all agreed on this one, I'm sure, earlier on. So we all love the All In podcast.
Yeah.
We've all felt recently it's got very one-sided.
Yeah.
And I really respected them this week when they brought in people with a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
And they debated it. And we heard both sides and we went, no, actually, I'm still happy. All In have been wrong. The two guys they brought in were very much on the point that I agreed on, but I was prepared to listen to both sides. Whether I'm right or whether I'm left, I like to hear both sides, whether I'm pro-war or anti-war, Ukraine, Russia. Lex Friedman has just interviewed Zelensky. I think he's lining up now to interview Putin.
Yeah.
I want to hear both sides of that story.
Yeah.
There's always two sides. And if you've done all of that, and if you have then made a decision, that decision is valid. That makes you qualified to vote, to express your opinion. What you can't do is listen to influencers, people that just tell you what you should do.
it's your responsibility
It's your
to
responsibility,
get the information.
I just don't think, for young people, it's dead simple. I don't think news can compete with entertainment when there's an endless variety and ocean of entertainment. It's just more interesting. When the tariffs thing kicked off last week and the stock market collapsed, and my daughter happened to be here with my grandson Arlo, and they were at the back garden, and I was taking phone calls from people who were pulling their hair out about where the markets were. She had no awareness of it at all. None. She was like, tariffs? Market? Like, what? It didn't even know what was happening in the world. It wasn't even on her radar, because that's not what she consumes as information. In fact, I would go as far to say is they're not consuming information, they're consuming entertainment.
Yeah.
Entertainment has replaced information.
And personalities have replaced political
authoritative voices.
So the best person you could probably listen to in terms of an independent voice in politics in the UK is Andrew Neil. I don't think there's very many people in under 25 listen to Andrew Neil, but everybody's consuming Nigel Farage because he was on a fucking celebrity get me out of here thing or something, you know.
I don't even think it's
unfortunately,
that, Andy. I think everybody's consuming Mr. Beast.
There's a
Nigel
cult
Farage.
of personality, but that is superseded.
So we're seeing a gap. We're seeing a pain point and a gap. And I suppose what we're realising is there is a sleeping giant, which is a youth who need to be invigorated. Because guess what? I'm at the end of my life cycle. What happens to the planet much further out than 20 years is irrelevant to me.
Well, let's say 10.
Do you keep eating those cheese twists the way you've been putting them away the night?
But for those that are in their 20s and 30s, they've got the whole of their lives ahead of them. To them, they are the ones where what's going on is important. So they need to educate themselves. And more importantly, it's up to us, you know, those of us that are unhappy with what's going on in the world. It's about ensuring that everyone around us. So again, I hate what's been happening in America in particular, but here also, where people are losing the ability to discuss and debate. I have never entered into debate with someone where I have won and they've said, you're right, I'm changing my mind. Very, very seldomly. But what I have noticed so many times is I've entered into discussions, I have put a point forward, and a day, a week, a month, or a year, I've then heard that point coming back to me over time. Yeah. Now that you've infected them with the meme, the mind virus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that ability that we all owe to ourselves to educate. And the last point I'm going to leave in this one is what I've realised more and more, and it's back to what you said on the last piece about employment, is about values. Actually, the more I speak to anyone, be it about war, be it about politics, be it about economics, seldomly do you disagree on values. We all want good health. We all want good economic prosperity. We all want safe borders. We all want to look after those that can't look after themselves. How we get there is where we tend to disagree. And I always think if you can start discussions with people on agreeing what the values you can agree on, and then you can debate civilly where the vector is between your beliefs on how to get there and mine.
So what's a good starting point? What can we leave kids with that are listening to this? What's a good... So they're not going to go away and get politically rounded on tons of different topics. So what do? Do you pick the topic that's really important to you, find 5 videos for and against, put them into ALM notebook and just get a kind of summarised view? I mean, what's a good starting point?
Go to the BBC News website once a day, or Sky News, or some other news website, and just at least familiarise yourself with what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
Start there.
My kids are completely unaware with what current affairs are on any given. I'm not even sure they could tell you who the Prime Minister is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're so uninterested. And they're smart kids. They're intelligent. They're articulate.
But you think kids at 25 that are earning
they're not
money...
interested and they're not engaged, and it's not the information they consume.
But I understand teenagers, because they're not really in the jobs market. They're not really earning money or buying cars or renting flats or buying houses. But you think kids around about the 25-year-old mark would be starting to get involved in all that type of stuff.
And you do see the percentage of them voting coming up, but it's still way below. I mean, I think it's about 50% as opposed to 70s and 80s for those older. So again... Yeah, start wherever you start.
Start somewhere.
Start. And then once you start, the only thing is constantly challenge yourself. Why do I think that? Why do I believe that? What's the other side of the story? And the only thing is just do not believe anyone that tells you that they've got the answer. I suppose that's maybe one good thing to leave it with. There is no simple answer to most problems. There is no yes, no, this is right, this is wrong. Whatever the solution is, and, you know, again, let's take America at the moment. Who knows how the tariffs will work out? But the one thing we do know is even if it does work out, there's going to be pain and suffering. And some people will lose, be it within the US or be it out with the US. There'll be winners and there'll be losers. So there are no solutions without victims. Yeah. And that's okay. But just try to understand for you, your family, and your society, do the research. Who will be the winners? Who do you think will be the winners and the losers? What's the price that this decision, this policy...
Let's wrap this up with a Charlie Munger quote. You should not be allowed to disagree with anyone unless you can articulate their point of view better than they can.
Great point.
Yeah. Listen, I blame social media for the whole thing. Like, it takes... We are probably tuned into current affairs more so than almost any other humans in the world. Like, we are junkies when it comes to news,
markets,
current affairs,
news and business.
We have for the people who listen, we have a WhatsApp group chat that we blow up 100 times a day. Did you see this? And can you believe
the
that?
10-year US Treasury yields up at 4.5%.
Yeah. Another nihilistic post by Paddy about the future of the UK and how we're all screwed. So we're quite unusual in that respect, but I do think at the other side of the spectrum, there's too many people dwell there.
Checked out,
who are completely unaware of what's happening in the world on any given day.
And back to democracy. Everyone's got a vote. That's how it should be. But we owe it to ourselves to ensure that those that are voting as best we can are all as informed as they can be.
Good.
Even the dum-dums get a vote.
Even the dummies. So we're going to finish on Google Cloud Next event.
Yes, sir. So Google Cloud Next. So in the same way that we talked about the NVIDIA AI event last week, we called it the Super Bowl for AI nerds, then think about Google Cloud Next as Google's equivalent to that. It's the Mecca for AI nerds. And so Google lays out all its cloud infrastructure, new AI services, new AI models. Very, very, I mean, if you're of my persuasion, it was actually, it was shaking with excitement watching the keynote, all the new things that have been developed. So it's everything from hardware breakthroughs all the way to new models, all the way to new tools and services that Google are building on top of these AI things, right through to new ways of interacting with agents and bots and agentic AI. So Andy, give us some of the clip notes.
I just think overall, just before we get into anything specifically, just after watching the keynote, it was like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that. It just definitely left you with the impression that Google have currently probably the most comprehensive suite of kind of AI tools of any of the large players in the space.
100%.
And one of the things that I was really blown away with was they have a unique opportunity here to scale in a way that nobody else does, because they're not dependent on the NVIDIA delivery timescale. They're not Beetlejuice in the queue on, number 1,789 billion. They've taken the scaling and hardware largely into their own hands with their development and production of their TPUs, not to be confused with GPUs. So they're tensor processing units, which it turns out, particularly for training large language models, are even better than GPUs for that narrow use case. And it just happens to be that that's for training models, for text interactions, for voice interactions. TPUs are not just better than GPUs, but they're actually fantastically more efficient and power efficient and cheaper to run.
Yeah.
So one of the analogies that I looked up was like a TPU would be like a Formula One car designed specifically to go as fast as humanly and efficiently as possible around a specific track, whereas GPUs would be a sports car like the Corvette you were looking at the other day, still incredibly fast and sporty, but designed to be more versatile and do more things on more roads.
Yeah.
So the fact that this is Google's own chip, it's their design, they have the ability to produce them, they're not sharing that chip with anybody else, they get first dibs on all production themselves. It seems to have put them in the driving seat in terms of being able to scale up the compute to deliver this next level of models that are coming downstream.
And that kind of manifests itself in this new chip to launch in the second half of this year called Ironwood, which will be 3,600 times more powerful than their first TPU they launched in 2018.
And almost 40 times more powerful than the current generation of chips that they have just now.
I don't know if there's anything mentioned, but one of the things that always fascinated me about Google was Willow, their quantum chip, and where that's all going. So, and again, I always, and this is not investment advice, but I'm always surprised because Google actually aren't faring particularly well as far as stock appreciation is concerned.
Yeah.
And yet I look at them and I go, they really have it all going right at the moment.
100%. I think it goes back to episode 1, the predictions episode, where we said, listen, don't forget, Google are the OGs of this whole thing. They invented this. They invented the transformer, the T in GPT.
Yep.
Generative predictive transformers. The transformer part is what gave birth to this whole class of software. They were the inventors of that. And they definitely got a late start, but man, they're just productizing it. They're turning the capability, the underlying capabilities into very complete, professionalized, polished products in a way that nobody else is right now. And I see that accelerating from here. So I think they've actually got an advantage at the model level now. They were always the kind of number 2 and number 3. I think they're as good as anybody now with 2.5 Pro. And then the products they're building on top of it just feel more polished and more professional than anybody else's products. And it gave me an epiphany, which is, I think that these standalone services, I think the ChatGPT website and the Grok website, these are all fleeting moment in time things that will eventually go away. And the underlying capabilities of ChatGPT, Grok, and Google will just be delivered through more complete products. You know, like Notebook LM, which I showed you guys earlier, which I use for all my research for the podcast. You know, that's leveraging Gemini 2.0 under the hood. But I'm not going to the Gemini website. I'm going to the Notebook LM product, which leverages that capability to deliver the solution. And so I think these standalone web portals will just go away, and then fundamentally you'll consume the output and the value of these things through complete, polished, professionalized products.
And that seems to be where they have an advantage. I mean, an example, they demoed their new video generator, which is Imagen 3. So like ChatGPT have got Sora, and there are other really good image generators out
Veo,
there.
actually, Andy. I think Imagen 3 is the image generator.
Oh, sorry, that was the image generator. Yeah, the Veo 1, Veo 2. So just to give you an idea of the fit and finish of Veo 2, like Hollywood animation studios are now leveraging Veo 2 to come up with content for videos and for movies. And they're doing stuff at the Sphere as well, using Veo 2
they're bringing
technology
back,
as well.
They're remastering Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. So that's a level of fit and finish. You've got big marketing agencies like WPP are leveraging these tools as well. So it's just the fit and finish. I mean, some of the Paddy's showing, I mean, I know we're not a video podcast here, but as we are chatting, Paddy's thrown up on the screen some video. So these are videos that were created from text prompts. I mean, they are so ridiculously photorealistic. It's an absolute joke. And they were created by text prompts and nothing else.
And right now they're like 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but eventually
feature films will be created in these things.
Mean, if you assume any level of improvement, there'll be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 minute long videos that are possible in the coming.
So they've taken all the core capabilities that exist on the other big platforms like ChatGPT. So for a good example is now agents. So the evolution of agents has now reached its most advanced state through what they call their Google AI agent space. And they're taking these kind of Gen 1 GPTs that you could create, and they're just taking them to a completely different level. So you can now decide as you're creating them, do you want it to be a voice assistant? All the webhooks are there to embed them straight into Shopify stores. We saw a fabulous example earlier with the gardening shop. They're multimodal now, the agents straight out the gate. So you can hold up things and they can look at them and tell you what they are. And if you've got video content on your site, if customers ask questions about that, they can watch the video content and reason across it. So they're really just taking all the core capability and just taking it to a completely different level with a completely different level of fit and finish.
I think it's...
Seem to have solved the physics problem as well. Like the physics in these videos works faithfully, you know, like...
I think, going back to Andy's point though, I think for someone that like myself who's less technical, I looked at the Google, the stuff we were showing this morning, and you begin to realize this is what I expect it to look like. I expect, this is where we thought it was going to. The ability to speak in a real life fashion with an agent, for it to be able to look at what we're producing, to give me real suggestions, and then to be able to take the really exceptional cases, hand it off to a human, get some further input, come back to me as an agent,
complete the transaction
and upsell me. So all the things that we thought it should be able to do, it's now doing. So it's like the App Store. We're now seeing the actual delivery of what we thought the vision was be.
And then the final part of that is, I mean, there was tons of product features launched and new tooling and stuff, and you could sit here for another hour going through them one by one. But another one that I thought was amazing that we should really touch on this week is Firebase Studio. Mm-hmm. So do you want to just touch on that about its coding ability, vibe coding? And
so it's hard to know how to participate in this and at what level, because the hot AI company for the last 6 months has been a company called Cursor, which is a vibe coding platform where you can just like prompt an application or a website into existence and it makes it. It's one of the fastest growing SaaS products ever made. It's hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And then Google just come out with a Cursor clone called Firebase Studio that actually kind of by my experience at least, blows away Cursor. And so does that mean Cursor has any future at all? Does Cursor eventually go away? Does Cursor respond and we get even more? Like I wouldn't count Cursor out, but everything Cursor just built in the last 6 months, Google just made off the shelf. And so everywhere I look, I see examples of if I'd have got involved 6 months ago and put all the engineering into making that thing, these are all off-the-shelf capabilities now available to everybody. And I worry that the same thing will be true in 6 months.
Of everything.
Or 12 months' time. So Firebase Studio is the ability to prompt an app or a website or any kind of software product into existence just by typing into a search box. So I've been trying it out. I made a little basic CRM system for myself just to prove that it
which
could
we
be
demoed
done.
Before this, which again, if you're the power washer or whatever, has got all the features that you need, and it took you 10 minutes to build it.
I had it capture contacts, companies, and opportunities in all the different form fields I would need for that, write them to a database, be able to do some basic reporting on that, built it all in 6 or 7 minutes. Very simple example, but it works.
And it brings us back to entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
Start lean, no cost. So we were talking about a few pounds last week, the week before.
Yeah.
Now we're talking almost free
Yeah.
to just build your own CRM and go off and use it.
I think one of the things that's different about Firebase Studio, because you could vibe code in a ton of other platforms before this, right? Fit and finish of the code was poor. It would execute sometimes, it wouldn't execute other times. But one of the things that I believe is different about Firebase Studio is debugging is built into it, and you can edit code as you go along.
And they'll take the product that you just built and they'll host it for you as well. So they'll actually put it on the web for you rather than just...
So you can actually deploy it,
So
and you don't
can
need
deploy it, and you don't have to figure out how to then get that code onto a server and run it. Now, none of this was possible 6 months ago. And so just in that period of time, the amount of progress that's been made has been astronomical. I used to be really skeptical that in the future you'd actually be able to build useful, meaningful software products that solve real problems for real companies with this vibe coding technology. Now I'm 100% sure it's going to happen. Because if you assume any rate of improvement, even much less improvement than I think we're going to get in the next 6-12 months, I think this is nailed on. Also heard another thing, it's a bit of a segue, but I listened to, is it Mira Murati or whoever the CFO of OpenAI is? They're building a virtual programmer. So we know that AI can code, but coding's only one part of the entire software development lifecycle thing where you ideate and you come up with a spec, you then code it, you then write the documentation for it, you then write the testing, you then do a pull request and somebody reviews your code and deploys it. They're building a complete software development agent that does all the things and takes all that stuff into consideration. So anyway, long story short, in the future, in the very near future, if we describe the very near future as 6 to 12 months, you're actually going to be able to build full stack, complicated, serious software products that solve real problems for real companies through vibe coding.
And as you said, teams, there's teams that have been, there's maybe tech teams that have been working for 6 months on a product development roadmap, and their work has been completely invalidated with all the stuff that's happening with Agent Space and Vertex and Firebase Studio and stuff. It's insane. Like,
remember,
you wouldn't know what to work on now in terms of manually coding stuff.
100%. You remember about 6 weeks ago, we predicted that it would be a quiet summer and it would maybe be the back end of the year. I actually think that prediction is going to get turned upside down. I don't think it's going to be a quiet summer.
So
I think Grok 4 is coming. I think ChatGPT 5 is coming. I think Claude Sonnet 4.0 is coming. I think all the things are going to happen in the next 3 months.
We're on the hockey stick curve. We're basically seeing that acceleration. It's becoming exponential, and all the things that and that's what I keep trying to say to people. The changes that we think are coming are not 3 and 5 year changes. They're 3 to 12 to 18 month changes. Yeah. And at some point soon, the weight of those changes will become very obvious in a lot of things.
I just keep thinking back to our prediction show and some of the things that we were talking about that which may materialise in the next 12 months, and particularly around about agents and stuff. All of that stuff is here now. Yeah. And that show was like 13 weeks ago. It's insane.
And we've almost turned it into a full-time job trying to keep up with it, trying to keep up with the latest things that are happening, that they invalidated the previous wave of stuff that was actually the next big thing 3 months ago, and that invalidated the previous wave of stuff that was the next big thing 3 months before that. So it's certainly for me becoming almost a full-time job just trying to keep up with the latest and greatest and log into all these tools and try them out and figure out what's shit and what's actually real. And so how does a normal person do it?
Have you found anything that's shit so far?
Oh, listen, there's plenty of shit out there. There's plenty of, particularly on the coding side, like most of those vibe coding products that are baked into Grok and baked into ChatGPT and stuff, like 25% of the time it would run and 75% of the time. I mean, it was pretty janky stuff. The image generators up until this very most recent generation of image generators were very poor as well. Yeah, there was all that. They'll never be able to get words right. They'll never be able to spell. They'll never get the physics right. All their problems got solved. You never get enough fingers on the hand and all that kind of stuff. I mean, but
and I think it's a thing we talked about earlier today. But I think what we're going to see more and more with models is they're going to become smaller all the time. Yeah. Very specific. The more information it's now got is going to confuse it. Very industry specific, product specific, task specific.
We're looking, as we're talking about this, to a photorealistic seen video of a skateboarder pulling the most incredible moves ever. And if somebody told you that it was an excerpt, a 4K excerpt from Tony Hawk's next documentary, there's nothing on there to suggest that that wouldn't be true. So we're kind of here with a lot of this stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, that's as bit as realistic as you'll get in a feature film.
So so to wrap this up, let's finish up with a top tip and a recommendation. I think the paid Gemini subscription, I think it's the Google Premium Gemini subscription at $20 a month. When you consider everything that you get for it, so you get 2 terabytes of storage, you get Gemini, you get Notebook LM Plus,
the image generator,
you get the image generator, you get the Gemini agent and all the Google suite of products, you get 1080p video quality in Google Meet, you get longer recording times. When you add up all the value of that, compared to the same amount of value just to log into the ChatGPT website, the Google $20 a month is now represents stunning value for money.
One thing which I was amazed at, I think I shared it with you last week, was I checked on, I've got Revolut. I use Revolut, find a fabulous product. And if you're wanting to sponsor a podcast, Revolut, please have a word with us.
Please get in touch with us.
But for, I think it's the premium, which is about £80 a year for Revolut, and it gives you Perplexity free. So I've saved myself £20 a month on Perplexity.
Just by having your Revolut account.
Which frees up £20 so I can go and get Gemini.
There you go.
Fantastic.
Top tip. So we've ended up with a couple of top tips, and now we are officially 1 hour 15 minutes into the podcast.
We did it again.
That we said, could we make it 40 minutes? The answer is
definitely not.
All right, what's that, episode 15? 14. In the can. Thanks everybody for listening. Stephen, what do they need to do?
Like, subscribe, share, leave a review.
Wherever you get your podcast.
Or go to the roundtablerethink.com.
And if you only do one of those things, share it. We've got fantastic reach already, considering we've only been at this for a few months, but we want to do even better. So do all of those things if you can, but if you can only do one of them, share the podcast.
And to leave it on the theme of the show, listen to us, go out and listen to something else. Go and educate yourself. The world is full of information. Yeah. Go listen to something you don't agree with.
All right.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
That's it for another week.
Good night.
See you later.